First of all, the CBO score is wrong. The CBO has been wrong repeatedly. It was wrong when they scored the first Trump tax cuts. They were wrong by over...
And deficits. The fact is we are $36 trillion in debt, up $30 trillion over the last 2 decades. Both parties bear responsibility for that. Joe Biden increased federal spending by $5 trillion in the first 2 years. We're now running $2 trillion deficits. We're paying $1 trillion in interest.
Boom! Right out the gate. Denial, deflection, and a tidal wave of spin. A bill that could cost the U.S. economy $3.8 trillion, and Trump allies are brushing it off like it's a rounding error. Are they clueless, or just hoping you are? The Trump tax bill is back, and this time, it's packing a deficit bomb that could detonate the economy. Welcome to the channel that doesn't sugarcoat betrayal. Hit that subscribe button and buckle up. We're unpacking the real cost of Trump's Tax Cut 2.0. It all started with a gut punch from the Congressional Budget Office. A nonpartisan bombshell
concluded that this bill in its current form would add a whopping $3.8 trillion to the federal deficit between the years 2026 and 20.
But before that number could even settle, Republican Congressman Andy Barr rushed to discredit the CBO, trying to flip the script before it had even aired. Republicans have a long-running feud with the CBO, claiming the office doesn't do scoring dynamically, essentially accusing it of ignoring growth effects from tax cuts. This time, they were prepared. The denial campaign kicked off before the report even dropped. Barr and others tried to undermine the data, setting up a classic deflection play. Dismiss the referee if the score looks bad. Cue Congressman Andy Barr going on full attack mode against the CBO.
Well, look, first of all, the CBO score is wrong. The CBO has been wrong repeatedly. It was wrong when they scored the first Trump tax cuts. They were wrong by over...
Barr's argument? That the CBO gets things wrong because they don't factor in economic growth. But here's the kicker. It's not because they won't. It's because they legally can't. As CNN's Phil Mattingly had to remind the panel,
but they're not allowed to. It's not like a...
And while Republicans blast the CBO, they conveniently ignore that other independent institutions, including Moody's and the Joint Committee on Taxation, are waving the same red flags. Barr's attack wasn't just weak, it was desperate. This isn't some isolated accounting error. It's a bipartisan economic alarm.
CBO, the Joint Committee on Taxation, says $3.8 trillion to the deficit over 10 years. The Penn-Wharton budget operation, $3.3 trillion over 10 years, even if you account for...
That's not a CBO quirk. That's a full economic consensus. And when Moody's downgraded the U.S. credit outlook earlier this year, they specifically cited these fiscal projections. The idea that tax cuts pay for themselves? It's been tried. It's failed. Every single time. Even Reagan's economists eventually admitted the math didn't work. But here we go again, with another giant tax cut package aimed at scoring political points while blowing another hole in the national balance sheet. Congressman Mike Lawler, one of the few Republicans trying to walk a middle line, at least acknowledged the danger.
The fact is we are $36 trillion in debt, up $30 trillion over the last 2 decades. Both parties bear responsibility for that. Joe Biden increased federal spending by $5 trillion in the first 2 years. We're now running $2 trillion deficits. We're paying $1 trillion in interest.
And while he tries to defend the bill as a step forward, he still admits,
we're talking about $1.5 trillion in savings, which is about 1.7% of the total spend. So, we're making progress, but the fact is you still have a long ways to...
Translation. This bill shaves pennies while handing out trillions. The math doesn't lie, and neither do the consequences. Forget just the CBO. When multiple economic watchdogs, all with different methodologies, land on the same catastrophic figure, that's not a glitch. That's a warning siren. The Penn-Wharton budget model, often cited by both parties, laid it bare.
$3.3 trillion over 10 years, even if you account for...
Let that sink in. Even with all the optimistic assumptions Republicans want, tax cuts boosting growth, increased revenues, the bill still adds $4 trillion to the deficit. Moody's even factored this in when downgrading the U.S. economy earlier this year. This isn't just about fuzzy projections, this is about the United States potentially walking into another credit crisis, willingly. And yet, GOP lawmakers like Barr continue to spin this as a growth engine, while completely ignoring that every major independent analysis says this bill would hemorrhage revenue. And what do voters get in return? A modest SALT cap adjustment and another round of corporate giveaways, all while the national debt chokes the economy and interest payments hit $1 trillion a year. Republican Congressman Mike Lawler, one of the more measured voices in the party, tried to wrap it all up with a dose of realism.
Curve. You're not going to fix this all in one setting, and there will be a requirement to have buy.
But even that fell flat. Because when pressed, the numbers didn't lie.
Fact is, we're projected to spend $86 trillion over the next decade. We're talking about $1.5 trillion in savings, which is about 1.6.
That's not a plan. That's an aspirin for a heart attack. And Lawler, in trying to claim progress, actually exposed how paper-thin the savings are. Meanwhile, House Speaker Mike Johnson is scrambling behind closed doors, desperately trying to win over holdouts from both the far right and swing districts. If he moves the bill too far right to appease deficit hawks, he loses moderates. If he tries to soften it, he loses the base.
We've never claimed that this is a perfect bill, but it's a dadgum good.
That's what one Republican said. But dadgum good doesn't cut it when you're torching trillions in fiscal space. This isn't just bad policy. It's dangerous. And the worst part? They're rushing it before Memorial Day, while voters are distracted, hoping no one notices the long-term wreckage. Let's call it what it is: a political stunt wrapped in trillion-dollar consequences. They've spent years screaming about debt ceilings and runaway spending, only to push a tax bill that would crater the budget, torch our credit, and lock future generations into even deeper debt. The same lawmakers who shouted about fiscal responsibility are now praying you don't notice the fine print. But you did. And now, it's time to speak out. Hit that subscribe button if you're done with economic lies and political shell games. Share this video. And remember, a $3.8 trillion mistake isn't a partisan issue. It's a national crisis in the making.